Welcome to Morning After, the show that sheds light on the difficult topic of pregnancy and infant loss. This is a place where you can find solace and community through hearing other people's journey. I'm your host, Jasmine Compton. Welcome to Morning After. This is a special episode because we have Jen here, but also because it's our first actual video recording in person, which is pretty big. We're on video now, which is exciting. And we have Jen Fegel here today. Yeah. We have met through mutual friends. Excited to have you here and hear your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is the first time I'll be able to hear your story from start to finish. I've heard little parts, so I'm very excited. So, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You got kids, yes. You're married, tell all the little things.
I have 3 kids. I'm married to an amazing husband named Trapper. I work for a healthcare system for Providence. And I've worked in healthcare for a little over 10 years. I grew up in Sandy on a farm. We love to go hunting and doing anything outdoors. Yeah.
That's awesome. 3 kids. What are their ages?
Avery is 3 and a little over, I think 3.5. Jackson is 2.5. And then my son Riker is 8 months. Nice. Did you know you always wanted to be a mom? I did not.
Okay, you didn't.
Yeah. So
I think you're the first. I've asked that, and I think you're the first person. I was like, no. Everyone else was like, I knew I wanted to be a mom. That was for me.
Yeah. So I actually have been married. This is my second marriage. So in my first,
I did not know that either.
Yes,
learning so much about you.
Married, pretty young, and I think at that time, I just never thought about having kids. I just didn't really think it was for me. Looking back now, I think part of that was having to do with how our relationship was. I think that I didn't want to have kids because of that. Yeah. And so when I met Trapper, I obviously fell in love with him, and it brought out a whole different side of me.
She was like, I want to make babies.
Yeah. And he always he wanted kids.
Okay.
He was like, I'm going to have kids. And, that was very apparent from the second we met. And so, but yeah, as we were dating, I think I was like, oh yeah, I do want to have kids. And I want to have kids with this person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you guys meet? And when did you get married?
We met in I don't know what, maybe 2013, maybe 2014, 2013, and dated for, I think 4 or 5 years. We got married in 2018.
So your guys' journey then, so obviously at this point, he wants to have kids, and your mind is I want to have kids now. You've changed that.
Yeah.
So 2018, you guys get married. Do you guys have a timeline, or when do you guys have the conversation of starting to try, or how does that go?
Well, when we first met, I was working in a primary care clinic, and so I was a front desk person in a primary care clinic. When we started dating, I moved up into a position at a women's clinic.
Okay. At
that time as well. So I feel part of also was, yes, me meeting him and being I want to have kids with him, but then also when I started working in an OBGYN clinic, that also exposed me to pregnancy and having kids, and what an amazing experience that was. And I was I want to experience that. And so when we got married, I think I had been working in the women's clinic for maybe a year. And literally, I think the week after our wedding, I went in and got my IUD taken out, and we started trying immediately.
She was ready.
Okay. And I'm older than him. I'm a couple years older. True. So I was if we're going to do this, I knew just from working in the clinic, I'm for some people it takes a really long time to get pregnant. So we should just start right away.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, our plan was we're going to get married and start trying right away.
Okay. So you started trying really 2018.
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
So I took my IUD out, and everybody was it's going to take a while. So don't, be concerned if it takes a while, and blah, blah, blah. I was pregnant the very first month.
Oh, what?
With our first pregnancy, yeah. Okay. So, I don't even know if I even had, an actual cycle.
Yeah.
I just, literally, we were pregnant within the first 3 weeks of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were super excited.
Yeah.
Obviously, we told like our family right away. We told everybody right away, you know, and in my mind, I think at that time, I was seeing women miscarry all the time in my clinic. I mean, that was a very common thing. I knew it was a very common thing.
So, you know, yeah, I feel like that's different because we
Yes.
kind of talked about this before we started,
But
which
you
is
don't-
you're exposed
Yeah.
to it and you know about it, which I think a lot of women know how common it is, but you also were exposed to it in your job on a day to day.
Yeah, I think the statistic is 1 in 3.
Yeah.
Pregnancies will end in miscarriage. And so I was very aware of that. But at the same time, you don't think it's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You just don't. And I was still just as much unprepared when it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you just don't think it's going to happen to you. So I found out I was pregnant, and obviously I was the supervisor of the clinic. Was very close with the doctors and the staff. And so everybody was also very excited that I was pregnant. And I think around like, I was going to have my very first ultrasound around like 9 weeks. And Trapper came there after work, and we were going in, and obviously like the medical assistants, I'm close with all of them still to this day. We're all very close. I hung out with one of them last night actually, but they all wanted to be in the room. I'm like, yeah, everybody can come in, like no big deal.
Yeah.
You know, we do this all the time. And so, you know, they go to do the ultrasound, and immediately I knew. I was, you know, working in the clinic. I knew that when there was no heartbeat. I could tell that just seeing it, that there was no heartbeat.
So you had a missed miscarriage.
I had a missed miscarriage. Yeah. So I should have been like 9 weeks. I was throwing up every day. I was having all the pregnancy symptoms. Yeah. So there was no indication to me that something wasn't going well. You know, for most people, it's like, if you're having symptoms, everything's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And you don't even think about it. You're like, I have strong
like literally
pregnancy
that
symptoms.
day I had thrown up several times in the bathroom at work. Like, so I thought everything was fine.
Yeah. And also within miscarriage, there's not any like a spontaneous miscarriage. There's no bleeding either. Right. So it's like, so were you like, how'd you feel seeing that? Like,
yeah, I was actually trying to like talk about this scenario last night to bring it all back in to the forefront of my mind. I looking back now, like I was very much in shock.
Yeah.
One, I'm not a typical like show your emotions person, and obviously this is also my work, and I was their boss. Yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening, and the doctor was trying to give me my options, and you know, she was like, we can either go into surgery and do a DNC, or you could do this at home. And I was like, I just want to get out of here. Like, I want to get out of, like, internally, like that was my dialogue. Like, how can I get out of here? I don't want to be doing this. I don't want everybody sitting here feeling sad for me. Like, I want to get out of this space as fast as I can. And so, and I also was worried about missing work, and I was like, if I have to go do surgery, like I'm gonna have to miss work, and like stupid things.
You're just thinking about other things.
Like I wasn't thinking about myself.
Yeah.
Like I was like, how, and I knew my husband was here also experiencing that, and he was bummed out. And so I was like, you know, trying to think about how I could care for his feelings and just get out of this. Like I just needed to get out. And I don't even remember all of the things that the doctor said to me. But I was just like, I'll just do it at home. Like, I just want to go. I want to get out of here, whatever. She's like, okay, I'm going to call in your medications. We kind of talked about like what I would need to do with the medications. And I was like, I just want to leave. And so we left, and I can remember we went and had, like, I was, you know, hungry. And so we went and had food, and I was like, I was just looking back, I think I was just in total shock, like trying to act like everything was fine. Like, this isn't a big deal. This happens all the time. You know, I was like reassuring my friends were like, let me see your pic. You know, like they knew I was having an ultrasound, and I'm like, they were more like I can remember consoling some of my friends, like calling me to be like, what's happening? And I'm like, it's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But I wasn't fine at all. Like I was very much devastated.
Did you feel your emotions at some point during that process? Like, did it take like time, a day, or like, what was the process?
I didn't
you took
cry.
the medicine.
Yeah. So I didn't cry. And I remember feeling really bad that I wasn't crying.
Because you're like,
I should be like crying. Like everybody's sad. Like, why am I not crying? And like feeling really uncomfortable about that. We went to dinner, like went and got the medication. Like I started the medication and they were like, once you take the medication, it's going to take a couple hours to like take effect. And basically the medication like opens your cervix so that you can just pass everything. And I remember them explaining that part to me, like, you're going to take the medication, and a couple hours later, you'll start experiencing severe cramping, and then you're going to, like, pass tissue and, blah, blah, blah. And I remember having that conversation, but what I didn't think about was what that meant.
Yeah.
And so when we got home, I took the medication. I think it was, like, 11 o'clock at night, and I started, like, having, like, pretty severe cramping, and it's essentially like your water breaks, like fluid starts coming out, like your water has broke. Yeah. It's very similar. Like now that I've had kids and experienced what it feels like is very similar. And I remember being like, oh, I just need to go like sit on the toilet, like, or something, Yeah. And then everything starts passing. And so I remember calling Trapper into the bathroom because I was like, okay, like, are we supposed to flush this down the toilet?
Oh yeah.
I was very unprepared for that. That was the most traumatizing part of the whole experience. Hindsight, I probably should have just went and done a D&C.
Yeah.
But I...
Or like they could...
had a conversation of like, this is what to expect.
Yeah. I've heard from people, it's like, there's not a good preparation piece of like, that could be what you want to do if that's your choice. Yeah. So there could be a way to... There's like things to catch.
Yes, 100%. And you can like... send it off for testing, and there's all kinds of things you can do, but I think because when I was in the clinic, I was like, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
I didn't
probably ask all the questions.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I had a miscarriage, and some people I know have had that too. And which is also not super common. A miscarriage isn't that common. It's like 1 to 5%. Yeah. But the biggest feeling is like, it's just disbelief. It's like, you can't even, which I can't imagine what a spontaneous, I haven't had that, but like, it's just so like, I feel like your brain can't connect to like what 100%. Is happening.
Yes.
Because you're like, everything that I have ever known about pregnancy, it's like, I have strong symptoms, there's not blood, like, so it's just like, I can't imagine then you're going through that and being like, this is so like, I was just pregnant. I don't understand.
And I'd already told everyone, like all of our family, all of our friends, and everybody was so excited. Yeah. And so then that was another thing that I was like just dreading having to tell anyone. But I didn't cry for a couple days.
Yeah.
And then I can remember on like, I think it was like a Sunday, Trapper had to go do something somewhere, like at his parents' or something, and he left. And the second he shut that door, I just sat on the floor and like uncontrollably cried for like a very long time.
Yeah.
And then eventually called him and was like, I need you to come home. Like, I can't pull myself together. Like, please come sit with me. Like, and he did. He came home and was like, obviously there and wanting to be supportive and helpful. But it took a couple days for it to really like emotionally hit me.
And was it also, is it days of cramping and like, is it, or like how long does that process itself last?
Yeah, the cramping and stuff was only maybe like 12 hours of it, and then it was just like bleeding that like slowly dissipated over a few weeks, like, but you weren't like passing tissue. I think the longest was like maybe like 10 days, so maybe like 2 weeks ish.
Okay. Did you feel, so obviously you shared with people, did you feel like, and this might be different for you because you work in the OBGYN, right? But I'm curious if you felt like you were supported or like, what did that look like for you?
I mean, I think at that time, everybody wants to be supportive and helpful. For sure. And your friends want you to feel better. Right. Yeah, everybody wants you to feel better. Nobody wants you to be sad, and everyone feels sorry for you in what you're going through. But I think that was uncomfortable for me. Like, I didn't like that. Like, I wanted people to just, like, I'm fine, like, I'm fine.
Did you want to just move on?
Yeah. Like, I was like, okay, I just want to, like, move on and, like, try again. Like, I just want to, like, get past this,
Yeah.
And I want it to be done. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to like close the book, like, and not even think about it anymore, because I was like so devastated by it that I was just like, I'm not ready to, I don't want to sit in this. Like, I don't want to sit in this. I want to move on.
I feel like there's always like two groups when it comes to miscarriage. Also, it's like there's the group that like needs time before they try again and needs to take the space, and then there's a group that's like, okay, I just know I need to try again. I'm ready to like move forward. I want to be pregnant.
And I think part of me was like, well, if I just get pregnant again, like it'll make this feel better.
Yeah.
You know, like it will take away these sad feelings that I'm having.
Because
even though I was like, I want to move on and I don't really want to talk about it, that wasn't healthy or good for me.
Yeah.
Because what would happen was it would come out at some point in other ways. Yeah. And as my story continues on, like it was very much like a very like I would
like compounded grief essentially,
yeah. And I would just have these moments or times where I would be drinking or whatever, and it would come out like uncontrollable. Like I couldn't stop crying. I wouldn't be able to like lock it up and shut it down. Like it would just come out uncontrollably.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely, like, hindsight, should have handled it a different way.
Yeah.
But you know, in those times, that was how I thought I needed to handle it, was just by like moving on.
And it's a hard type. I've said this probably, and I'm probably going to say it in almost every interview, but the grief is so different than any type of grief, because it's like, one, I literally have said this so many times, but it's so true. And I think people don't think about it or realize it, but the grief is so different in two very key ways. Number one, it's the only grief of like a life that you haven't known, and it's about grieving what you'd hope for, the things you planned for. Like it's this thing that hasn't happened yet, so it's like that's different. And then the other part about it that I think is super heavy, but it's the reality of it, it's the only type of death that goes through your body. And that is like so wild to even think about. And how do you putting it together in that way, like it's just so different.
And I think like the internal dialogue that you start having with yourself about, was it something that I did?
Why did this happen?
Like should I have done, you know, taken more vitamins? I mean, the things you think about are so silly, like looking back now. Like, you know, you're trying to, I can remember feeling like there has to be something that I've done wrong, you know, even though I worked in a clinic, I knew that was not the case, but it still hit me in that same way.
Your mind tries to like figure out how you can control, like, and make a reason for like, this isn't going to happen again because I'm taking more vitamins, like obviously, or I'm like, you know, all the things that we make up. So you go through that. And this is 2018. So how long, what was the process after? When did you start trying?
Immediately.
Okay.
And I got pregnant immediately.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow.
I got pregnant immediately. And
what was the feelings?
It took a while. Like I think it took like a couple months for my cycle to actually come back, like my actual cycle.
I was gonna ask about like, you know, but HCG, all that stuff.
Yeah, we tracked my HCG. Like it went down to 0. I think like probably 6 weeks later, I got my period again, and we tried, and we're pregnant again.
Okay, so still
I take a pregnancy test, and like I said, I work in a clinic, so immediately they're like, "We'll order your HCG. We'll start tracking it." Okay. Like perfect, and your HCG should double every 48 hours. I mean that sometimes 72, but most of the time 48 hours is like the golden number you're looking for, that you want it to double in 48 hours. And my second HCG came back, it had doubled. We're feeling great, and then I started having spotting. Which is normal. Like, that's not necessarily a bad sign. A lot of people have spotting. But immediately, obviously, and I was a nervous wreck. Like,
that's what I was going to ask you, is how you felt.
Yeah, and I think I was just, I was very nervous that it was going to end again in a miscarriage, but thought to myself, there's no way that it's going to happen again.
Because that's rare, right?
Because that's rare.
Yeah.
And, so I started having spotting, so we went in to do my HCG, and it hadn't gone up like we had wanted, like you would want it to.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, we'll wait 48 hours and check it again, because sometimes anomalies happen and things don't, just because they want it to double every 48 hours doesn't necessarily, if it doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong. That's just like what the norm is, you know? And so we checked it again, and it had dropped a little bit. So they were like, well, that's interesting. So you're probably miscarrying. I'm like, okay, cool.
And how far along were you at this?
Like 6 weeks,
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay.
And so I was like, great, we're having another miscarriage. So we take my HCG again to start tracking it down, and it had gone up a little bit. So it was like doing this like waffling like back and forth, which is not a good sign.
What is?
So there's
I've
lots
never
of
heard of that.
Yeah, so there's lots of things that can cause that. Things like an ectopic pregnancy, a molar pregnancy. It's definitely it's abnormal. Like we at that point we knew this was not going to be a successful pregnancy. This is something else. But when there was no indication of a pregnancy within my uterus when we did an ultrasound. So then they were worried about my tubes. And so they looked at my tubes. They couldn't see anything in any imaging, but anytime we would check, it was just doing this like slow up and down. It was never just like trending down. It wasn't
going down,
yeah.
Right.
And my bleeding wasn't increasing. Like it was very minimal. And that went on for like a week. And so at that point, you have to, when they can't find the pregnancy and it's not doing like going down like that, the risk is it is in your tube somewhere. Oh my God. And that they just can't see it yet, but it can grow and obviously rupture your tube. Or that it's, there's all kinds of other things that can go on. So you have to, in those cases, take a medication to, terminate that pregnancy essentially.
Different medication.
It's a different type of medication. Okay. It's actually I had to go to
chemotherapy
it's a chemotherapy drug. Yeah, so I had to go to like a chemo infusion clinic and get an injection, and it just makes you feel really crappy. Like your stomach, it makes your stomach upset. Like you just don't feel good. And it's supposed to work with one injection, but it didn't work with mine, and so I had to do a second injection. I think like a week later.
How do you know it didn't work?
Because they're tracking your HCG. It should go then start trending down, but it just kept doing this waffling even after doing the first injection. And so then we did the second injection, and then eventually it went down back to 0. And at that point, like I was obviously working in the clinic, I have access to my doctor at any time. Yeah. So she was like, this is a little bit odd, that you've had 2 of these. You're clearly not having a problem getting pregnant. But if you have another one, you should probably go see a specialist. And I was like,
they should have had you see a specialist right then.
Yeah. Well, and that was, she was like, or we could send you now. And so we started looking into it, but I hadn't gone yet. And
where was your mental state at this point? Because also the chemotherapy thing, to say to people, makes it also so you can't try.
Yeah, you have to wait for a while.
3 months,
yeah,
right?
I think it was like 3 months. I think it was like 2 cycles we had to wait or something like that. Yeah, it was like a couple months.
Yeah.
That you have to wait because it can affect your future pregnancies in a negative way.
Right. So where was your mind at when you're experiencing 2 things that are in the rarity with no real like explanation at that point as to like why?
Yeah, I started to worry a lot that we weren't going to be able to have kids. And also I wanted to be pregnant so bad. Yeah. So I was just like kind of obsessed about it. Yeah. Like I need to start trying again. Yeah. Like I have to wait 2 months now. Like that's so annoying.
Well, that's why I call that out is like people who are like, I need to go,
time moves so slow. Yeah. During that
when
time.
You're waiting.
Yeah. It's a very like agitating experience, and then like when you get pregnant, you're taking like 50 freaking pregnancy tests and you're just obsessive about it. Like I was obsessive about it. Yeah. And also at the same time, just like trying to act like I was okay to everybody. I wanted to be okay for my spouse, who was also very sad and like was like, oh, this sucks, Yeah, like he was wanting to have kids, and so I felt pressure, not that he was putting pressure on me, but you just naturally, like, at least I was, like, I felt this pressure of, like, we need to get pregnant. Like, we got to figure this out.
Well, yeah, and I think probably as the woman, like, we're the ones, like, carrying the baby. I'm sure it's hard not to feel like the pressure you put on your own self in that and, like, not wanting to disappoint your spouse for the thing that, they really want too. So I can't imagine that. I was gonna ask too, like the toll it takes on your marriage too, where it just
So hard.
affects your relationship a little bit as well.
And at this point, when we, like, this second one, like, it was still, I mean, it had only been like 3 or 4 months. Like,
overall,
so it was like this whole story is only a tiny chunk of time. So I don't think it wasn't affecting us in that way yet.
Yeah.
It does as the story
yes,
continues
you continue on. Okay.
But at that
also,
time, we were just like, it's gonna be fine. Like, we're gonna figure this out.
Still
it's gonna be fine.
feeling more like we're gonna. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, it is, just before you continue on your story, it is wild to think that that's really, that trauma is so intense in a really short amount of time.
But I was very much like, this is a problem. We need to solve it. Like, we're gonna fix it.
Go.
Like,
yeah,
it's gonna be fine. But at that point, I did decide to go start to meet with a specialist.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, and so we ended up going and getting being seen at Oregon Reproductive Medicine, which they were amazing.
Shout out to them.
Yeah, shout out to them. Their team was just so awesome, and it was such a eye-opening experience. One, it's also really unique to me to think about as women how much we actually don't know about our body.
So much. Yeah.
So much. Like, I learned so much about my body during this time. But when we went to ORM, like, part of their process is they do like a whole intake process with like your history, and we had also done genetic testing.
Okay.
Because a lot of times when you have a miscarriage, majority of the time it's just like a genetic anomaly that, like, there's something that this was never going to be a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, it's not like there's anything.
Right.
It's just a random one-off.
But when you start having more than one, then they're like, man, we should probably like do some genetic testing. So we had got genetic testing done that all came back normal. So that was a great sign.
That's good.
So we decided to go meet with a specialist at ORM, and they do like, your whole history and your pregnancy history and how long you were on birth control, like all these conversations you start having with them. Mm-hmm. And then part of their process is they do like, as you get close to ovulating, when you get a positive ovulation test, they have you come in and they do an ultrasound of your uterus to check, like, how's your lining, because your lining has to be a certain thickness to be able to accept a pregnancy and let it like thrive and survive. So they check that, and they also like check to make sure you're actually they're seeing a large egg in your ovary, and like they do all of that stuff. Wow. And so when I did that, they were like, your eggs look great. There's definitely an egg ready to go. But your lining is thin. Like, your lining's on the thin side. And I don't remember like exactly the thickness it needs to be, but it was like 1 to 2 points under what they want it to be. So it wasn't like crazy extreme, thin, but it was like kind of thin. So he was like, maybe that's why. But he was like, honestly, I feel like you guys are going to get pregnant. Like, you're clearly not having a trouble like actually getting pregnant. And there's no real indication besides this lining to say to me that you can't carry a baby. Okay. Which that felt good to know. I think also being able to like see like, oh, I have an egg and it's happening. Like, it gave me like, I guess it made me feel a little bit more like we were doing something to like get this to work. To
get closer to work.
And that month I tried again, got pregnant, and it was a chemical pregnancy.
Tell everybody what a chemical pregnancy is. What's that? That's like, what, 5 weeks?
Like 4 weeks. So, you've taken a test, and within a week or two, you'll start having bleeding and get a negative test. Okay. Yeah. I mean, at that time, I was still also tracking my HCG, so... I already knew. Pregnant, I already knew that it was going down, and that's part of ORM. Like, they test you, and then you do every 48 hours or whatever, and you'll do another test.
Because your care is now with the specialty with ORM at that point. So how did you feel then when you're like filled with hope because they're like, I don't see why you can't carry, and then this happens. Yeah.
And so at that time, they were like, maybe we should do a test, and I can't remember how to pronounce it. It's like a salpingogram. I don't even know. Oh, okay. But they basically go in and take dye and like flush out your inside of your uterus and then flush out your tubes. And it's all while they're like watching it. So they can see if there's any abnormalities within your uterus, as well as like if there's any blockage or anything in your tubes. So we went and did that, and everything came back out came pretty normal, but they found that I had a spot of tissue in my uterus, like dead tissue floating, like that it was attached to my uterine wall, very near where you would eventually feed a fertilized egg in. So their theory was like, maybe it's your eggs are trying to implant in this tissue that is dead, so we need to go in and remove it.
What is it
And
from,
they didn't know. So when I had my IUD taken out, it was a very difficult removal. It was partially embedded.
Oh, God.
They wanted to take me, like, I had an option to go into surgery and have it removed, but because I worked in the clinic, I was like, no, like, we can make this work. Like, I can deal with the uncomfortableness. Like, let's just get it out. And so we had to remove, like, a partially embedded IUD. So one theory was that there was tissue damage from that. The other theory was like maybe it was part of some tissue of a like pregnancy that was still there that we didn't catch on an ultrasound. But regardless, I went in and had a surgery to have that tissue removed. And the hope was that after we would do that, I would get pregnant.
Okay.
And it would be successful. So we go in to try again, and I get pregnant right away.
Oh my gosh.
And it was another chemical pregnancy. And so at that point...
So at this point, this is 4
Yes.
losses.
And at this point, it was taking a pretty, like, serious toll on my relationship and also just, like, my work life. When I was like, can I even work in this environment anymore?
Yeah,
because it's so hard to see everyone who's pregnant all the time. And this is, like, really depressing. And so I was contemplating, like, do I need to find a new job?
Yeah.
And then also, like, the pressures of trying to get pregnant.
Does not make sex fun.
No. And it's hard on your relationship. And, you're having to time everything, like, so specifically. There's no spontaneity. There's no, like, and then there's also this added pressure of, like, we have to get pregnant. And so both of us were feeling that. And, he was also having just as much of a hard time. Like, when I talked about, like, how I would have these meltdowns that would happen in different ways, my husband would have the same things happen.
Yeah. Where
he would just have these, like, outpouring of sadness and grief and, like, being like, can we even have kids? Maybe we can't have kids. And then it was like having those conversations, like, this was our plan.
Yeah.
And now we might not be able to do that. And so what does our life look like if we don't have kids?
Yeah.
And then that also brought on a lot of guilt for me because I was like, clearly it's not a him problem because we're getting pregnant.
Yeah.
Your sperm is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I felt this immense guilt of, like, if we can't have kids, like, you should probably maybe go be with someone who can have kids because you wanted to have kids, like, so bad. And I don't want to take that from you.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, like, sadness and guilt around, like, feeling like I was potentially going to be the reason that he was going to miss out on something that was really important to him.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is the effect that it has on your significant other. Because they're trying to care for you.
Yeah.
And be strong for you, but they're also really sad. And no one asks them how they're doing.
Too. Yeah.
Like, everyone's like, would always want to ask me, how am I doing? Like, whatever. But no one was like, hey, dude, how are you doing? Yeah. Like, this is just, I don't think anyone did that with him.
I think it's like you forget, I've talked about this a couple times too. It's like people forget because the woman is, like, going through it physically too, right? And so and they are just, like, being strong, and it's such a different. I'm sure, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but the grief it shows up differently. Yeah. It's kind of like you guys are together. Patrick and I had talked about this too, where it's just be like, I think it hits them at different times too. Mm-hmm. It can be delayed for them because they're, like, being strong for you. I just remember there was a time where it was just like, it hit him so much longer after. It's like I had been crying the whole time. Yeah. And then he cried at some time where I was like, I remember being like, are you crying right now?
Like, what's happening?
And he was like, that was just so, this moment for him was so different. Yeah. And I've talked about this in other interviews with people. It's just like, it really can hit them at just very different times because, I do think that they've had to be, like, strong and for their partner. Yeah.
And there was, like, lots of times during this period where, like, I would think everything is fine, and then, halfway through the day, I'm like, I have to leave work. Yeah. Like, I can't be here right now. Like, I would just all of a sudden, like, start having a meltdown in the middle of the day and, like, need to just leave. And, like, my husband was amazing. I mean, like, there's so many times where I would just be like, I can't today.
Yeah.
I can't do anything today. Nothing productive. Like, and he would show up in all the ways to be supportive and helpful. But, I mean, there was lots of days where the grief felt very overwhelming and, like, unable to cope. Yeah.
Well, and before you get to your next part of your story, I'm curious, you know, you've had 4 losses at this point. Obviously, there's people around you who've gotten pregnant, probably after you.
All my friends were pregnant.
Yeah, I do.
With my first miscarriage, I think at that time, literally my entire group of friends was pregnant. Like, almost every single one of them. We were all going to have babies right around the same age, which was a whole nother level of how hard it was. And then with, like, my second or third one, again, like, I had a lot of people around me at the time that were pregnant. And at that point, I was like, I can't be around like, I don't want to go to a baby shower.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And I don't want to, like, go and see, like, your nursery that you have set up, or, like, you know, and then you also feel guilty about that because it makes you feel like a really bad friend.
Yeah.
But there was times where I had to tell certain people, like, I'm so sorry to say this. Like, I'm happy for you. I'm so happy for you, but I can't be around you right now. Like, I need to give myself space.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard for me to sit in this. Like, we would have been having a baby at the same time or whatever that looked like. I mean, there was several scenarios where I had to ask for space, and most people were very understanding.
I was going to ask how
but there were people that were not understanding and were like offended and upset with me that I was saying I can't be around this right now. Like, I'm so happy for you, but I can't be around it. And there was certain people that were not able to understand that, which I don't hold that against them. If you haven't experienced it, you just don't understand it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It sucked that they were upset with me, but I wasn't mad at them about it. Like, I can't be mad at them for something that they don't understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was lots of people that were very supportive in during that time. The other hard part, though, is the things that people want to say to you.
Oh my gosh, this is talked about
so mind-blowing to me, or just you know, people want to tell you you're just trying too hard. Like, if you just stop trying so hard, you'll get pregnant. It's fine. You're gonna get pregnant. You're just trying too hard. Oh, or like, you know,
what are some of the ones that were like the most?
That one was one of the ones that really irritated me. Like, you're just trying so hard. You guys just need to relax. And I'm like, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
You know, or just saying weird things like, like, you're trying too hard. It's not, you know, it's fine. Like, you know, everything's fine. You're going to be fine. Or, you know, it's like, and at that point it was like, well, we might not be able to have a kid. Stop saying that.
Yeah.
Like, I might not be having a baby. Like, please stop telling me I'm going to have a baby. Like, you don't know that. And people are just trying to make you feel better. Like I said, I don't feel like I was ever angry with people, because I think it's just a lack of understanding, because people don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
And so they want you to feel better, and then they say things that you're like, that fall flat.
Kind of make you feel worse sometimes.
Yes.
This is a topic I know it's talked about in pretty much every interview, but it's, for me, that's why I started the podcast, actually. It's a huge, big reason, is because people's responses and things people said, I was like, whoa, this cannot be. Like, I get it's a taboo topic, like, right, you don't, it makes sense why everybody feels uncomfortable talking about it, but that's the hope of this podcast, is for people to hear, to talk about it more, and to hear ways in which, like, hey, these are things that, like, don't say these things. And I think the biggest thing that, you know, all of us struggle is we want our friends to feel better, right? And I think I just said this in a different interview, but I do think we struggle to just be in our feelings, to lament, right? Where it's like, all you really need to do, this is for everybody listening. If you're a support person, if you're going, you know, if someone's going through this and you're supporting somebody, the number one thing is just be in it with somebody. You don't have to try and make anybody feel better, because they're not. There's not words. You don't, especially when you get to certain points where it's like literally you don't know. So it's like, don't say anything. It's just like I'm so sorry. I'm here for you. Or do the acts of service. You know, I'm going to get you a coffee, or I'm going to bring you food, or send money, like whatever it is. It's just, I think it's like the pressure that you put. And I felt this even after going through my miscarriage. And I've had like quite a few friends who've gone through miscarriages right after me, which has been wild.
Yeah.
But even through that, I've struggled too a little bit on like how to support, because everybody's so different on what they need. But I think it's like, it's highlighting like there isn't some amazing inspirational thing that you're gonna say. Nope. You're not gonna say, nothing's really gonna matter, really. So just like be with the person in it, let them know you love them, that you're here, and that is like really what that goes the longest way, I feel like.
And I've had like a really close friend of mine miscarried, and I can remember she obviously, knowing my story, she was like immediately like came to me, and and the first thing I said to her was, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you, like this is gonna suck, and there is not anything that I can do that's gonna make you feel better. There's not anything that anyone can do that's gonna make this feel any better. Like only time is going to help you get out of this feeling. She was like, how do I get rid of this feeling? I'm like, there's just no, like, I can't tell you something that's going to make you feel better. Like, I'm just sorry. I'm so sorry. Like there's no words that will fill what you're feeling and make it better.
No, there's not. It is just time and just people being there. But so back to your story. So you've had, and thank you for sharing like how it was, because I wanted to highlight like you can have issues with your spouse, and then friends. That makes it hard. With friends are going through, I've said this many times too, but people's joy, it doesn't mean we're not happy or you're not happy, but it's always met with the sadness of the reality of the joy that you lost, right? So it's like, it's this really huge feeling. So appreciate you sharing that piece too with friendships. But so you're on number 4. It's the second chemical pregnancy. With ORM, were they just like, I have no idea type of thing?
Yeah, there was like, there's no medical
reason.
Reason that we can figure out that you just need to keep trying.
Which that place is like, to not have a reason for...
It was kind of reassuring in the sense that like there was nothing technically wrong. So that made me feel a little bit better, but at the same time it was very frustrating. Like, well, why is this happening then? Like, why does this keep happening? And also people would constantly ask me like, are you pregnant yet?
Oh gosh.
Constantly, like anywhere, like especially like family members and things like that. Like that would always be like the first question somebody wanted to ask me, which I always thought was also weird. Like, don't ask people that. Like, if you know that they're struggling to get pregnant, like don't ask that question. They'll tell you when they're pregnant. I just remember being like, I wish people would stop asking me that. Because then you have to talk about it, right? And they're want to like, well, what what's going on, and then it
opens the door to those kinds of comments that people get into too, because they feel awkward, and then it's like this whole thing. You're like, God.
But when we tried for a couple, so then they were like, well, let's try a medication that can help you release multiple eggs at the same time. Maybe we'll have some success if there's more than one egg. And there's like risks with that, right? Like you can have multiples. There's things that, come along with that, but we were willing to do that. So we tried a medication called letrozole. And we did that for a couple months and we didn't get pregnant. And at this time we were still like, I was going in like every month when I would get a positive ovulation, we would do the ultrasound to look at my eggs. Like, I mean, I was constantly going and driving places to do appointments and whatever. And,
this is like fully your life is...
I'm engulfed. Consumed, like I'm completely engulfed in it, and it's all I care about, and it's all I want, and I'm obsessed. Like literally. I mean, and every month I'm taking like 10 pregnancy tests and like, just going crazy and like obsessing. Like I can remember just like when I wouldn't be able to sleep, like spending hours on like phone, like just researching and like listening to things that I could try, or I was in a full obsession. And after we had tried for a couple more months, they were like, let's do another sonohystogram, I think maybe that's what it's called, where they go in and look inside your uterus and flush your tubes again. So we did that again, and they're like, everything, because they're like, maybe we didn't get all the tissue, like let's look. So we did, everything was fine. And then we went on like a good stint, like another 4 months of trying, and no positive pregnancy test. And at that point, like it was really weighing on our relationship, like just the routine of being like, okay, I'm ovulating, and like,
let's have sex.
You have to have sex the day of the, So when like what their policy was, like when you get a positive test, you would have sex the next 3 days. And like it was just so like regimen and like, you know, not fun and spontaneous. Like it was just, you know, that takes a toll.
Yeah.
And so we got to the point where we both were like, maybe we should just be done trying. Like maybe this is not in the cards for us. And like we really started having those conversations of like building a life without having kids. And I was like, I want to try one more month. And I had a prescription for another type of medication that makes you release more than one egg, different than the one I had originally done. And so I was like, let's try it. We'll try this one last time. No, at that point, so sorry, I did get pregnant again. I had another chemical pregnancy.
Oh.
And so I had five in total.
Yeah.
And then we were like, we'll try one more time. We'll try this medication. Like, this is the last month. And I got pregnant and it stuck.
Oh my gosh. And that's Avery.
That's Avery, yes.
Okay, well, so, and how was that journey?
Scary. Very scary. I mean, I was very anxious.
Were you considered high risk at that point? With
no.
All the, okay.
No. You know, most pregnancies will go on and be totally normal. Yeah. There was no indication that there was something wrong. You know?
So there wasn't any.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we did all of the things. Like, I think I took HCG tests for like the first, like 4 weeks, like every 48 hours. I mean, I was upset. Like, I was so stressed out that, and like, those are like another like thing that I think my experience is unique because I worked in this clinic. So I had access to these things, you know? And so to ease my anxiety, they were like, we'll just check it every, 48 hours until you can get an ultrasound. Because, if you do ultrasounds before a certain point, you don't see anything. Yeah. So even though you have a positive test, it's not like you're going to look in there and see something. It takes a while. And so that period of time, like, it was a anxious mess. I was constantly thinking that I was going to be miscarrying, that it wasn't going to work, But it just kept hitting all the milestones. Yeah.
Well, and so for you, like, was it anxiety the entire time? Did it ever let up?
No.
Fun.
Not with her.
Really fun.
No. I was pretty much, thinking of the worst case scenario constantly, whether that be like a late term loss or stillborn or, that's where my mind was constantly.
Sure.
Like,
well, and
we've already had so many problems and I see that at my work. And so I know that those things happen and they're common, enough. And so, I was just very, very much anxious the entire time with her.
Okay, well, she's your Earthside baby.
Yes.
God, I don't even know.
My 6th pregnancy.
Yeah, your 6th pregnancy. Rainbow baby. Like, what is the 5 being? I was going to say quadruple, but it's quin whatever.
Yeah.
Rainbow.
Yeah.
5-time rainbow baby.
And she's rad.
Yeah, I love that. And you have 2 more. I do. Then, I mean, you had one every year.
So we wanted to have kids pretty close together. So we were like, oh, well, we should probably try sooner rather than later because it's probably going to take a while. Like, I just assumed that it was going to be, a process again. Yeah. Like, I was going to have miscarriages or, it would take a while. And nope. The very first month we tried, I was pregnant.
And did you have the anxiety the same way, or were you kind of like...
it was a little... I mean, I still did, for sure, in the beginning. Like, we still did the whole, like, tracking and everything. But, like, once I hit, like, 18 weeks, I was like, okay, I feel better. It wasn't as intense. Like, I remember feeling not as anxiety-ridden the whole time.
Oh,
so I got to actually more enjoy that
pregnancy.
Yeah, with Avery, I didn't really get to do that.
Yeah.
I was just anxious the whole time.
Anxious, yeah. It's hard to, I mean, I can't imagine having that many.
Yeah.
And then it's not to get that out of your mind because already I've only had experienced one and it's like, just anxiety. It's hard to like remove your own experiences. And then again, you're in a clinic, you see a lot of stuff. So, so then the third time too was fairly easy for you to get pregnant.
Yep. It was an accident, so
I didn't know it was
slipsies. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that we were like, should we have 3? And like we kept going back and forth, and I wasn't on birth control, but we were just like, at that point, I was like, I got this down to a science,
Yeah.
Like at least I thought.
Yeah.
Because you go through months and months of trying and knowing exactly when you ovulate and exactly. I mean, it's actually way hard. This is like what I was mind blown by. Like when we're growing up, I was like, oh my God, if we have sex, you get pregnant.
Oh yeah, that's like, exactly how it makes it.
That's how I felt. So once I realized it's actually really hard to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Like it's a very small window of opportunity.
It's such a small window of opportunity.
And you have to get that window just right or it doesn't work out. And so I was like, oh, we got this down to a science. Like I know what I'm doing. And then I was like, one weekend, I'm like, I should have started my period like 2 days ago, and my period's never late. And so I'm like, that's weird. And so in the morning, like I would like said something to Trapper, and he was like, well, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, if I don't start tomorrow morning, I'll like take a test in the morning. And the morning came, and I'm like, he went to work, and I like go in the bathroom and take a test, and I'm like, turn back, and it's already positive. And I was like, I literally cried in the bathroom. It's like, we're going to have 3 kids that are all really small together. Like, I was in a complete panic. I'm like, we are screwed. Like, this is way too much at once.
What a different feeling, though,
I know.
from, like, where you'd come
So I called
from.
him and was like, guess what? And he was like, what? You know, he had no idea. And he was like, it's going to be fine. I'm, like, crying. Like, it's going to be too much. And he's like, it's going to be fine.
What a blessing, though. I just love, I love your story because it really is, like, I mean, I cannot imagine having to go through 5 losses.
It was a lot.
That's a lot. Over not a super long time frame.
No, it was like a 2-year
that's like 2 year like
not even 2 years. I think it was like 18 months maybe.
Yeah, that's a lot of trauma and loss, and I'm just so happy that you got your 3 Earthside babies. I still have a couple more questions before we wrap up though. Question about what do you feel like is your biggest learning over the whole journey? One.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things.
Well,
right?
you give me a couple highlights of the learning.
One, I think just how much we don't know about our own bodies.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think, we just don't know enough about our own bodies. And I think that that's really something that needs to change. I think also just the way the things people say to you, the way that people try to comfort you, like we're missing the mark, you know. And like I think the only way to fix that is by people, you know, having these types of conversations, so that people who haven't experienced that can hear that perspective and understand it. I think also just the internal pressure that we put on ourselves was something that was unexpected to me. Like I just remember, like, I think that's part of the reason why I would have these like colossal meltdowns of like just trying to, I wanted to make everybody else feel fine,
right?
Instead of taking care of myself. What I should have done was taken the time to take care of myself.
What do you feel like you would have done? Like, what would that have looked like? Getting a counselor?
I actually went and talked to a counselor.
Oh, you did?
And
at what point?
She was like, I mean, I think maybe like our 3rd miscarriage, we went and saw somebody because I was like having these meltdowns, and I'm like, we need to do something about it. And she was very much like, I feel like you guys are handling this really well. Like, it just sucks. Yeah. Like, but I wanted a fix. Like, I wanted somebody to fix it for me and make me feel better. And like the takeaway from that was, she was like, you know, you're doing the right things. Yeah. You just have to grieve. Like, it's just going to take a while. Like, you guys are supporting each other. Like, we went together.
Oh, that's good.
And, you know, she's like, you guys are, you know, having, you know, when you need a day, like, you're like, I just can't today. Like, I was very verbal, like, with what I needed with him. And so I had that kind of support, and we had that kind of dialogue. So she was like, I really think you guys are actually doing a pretty decent job. Like, you just have to grieve. Like, it's just going to take a while, and every day is going to be different.
Yeah. You wanted a thing to be like,
but I wanted
it
to be
past
fixed.
This. Yeah. Well, it's good that you talked about it. Those are great learnings. I think my last question for you is, you know, what would you say what piece of advice would you give to somebody who's currently going through loss?
Ooh, that's a hard one. It's hard.
And because and the support person.
Yeah.
So twofold. What would you say advice?
I think as a person like going through it, you know, one would be to take the time to take care of yourself. Yeah. Like, you know, it's okay to take days and say, I just can't today. Like, I'm not going to work today because I just can't today. Yeah. Or I don't, you know, I want to go home and just lay on my couch or whatever. Like, taking the time to do that, I think, is really important. Mm-hmm. I think also, like, you know, just I think it's good to do research and learn, you know, because there's so much to learn and there's so many opportunities and help and different things that you can do. Like, just because you've had a miscarriage or 2 miscarriages or whatever doesn't, you know, like in my case, like it wasn't that I couldn't have kids. Like it just took some time. And part of that I felt like was because, and this is my own theory, this is not like backed medical, but I had been on birth control since I was like 15 years old. And what an IUD does is thins your lining. Like that is what it does.
I don't know anything about it.
And that's a part of the way that it keeps you from getting pregnant. And so I think that also had an impact that I
for so long, like being like on
so I think it just took, in my opinion, took my body a while to get to the place where it was ready to carry a baby. So I think just like doing research and, you know, taking the time to, and just not putting so much pressure on yourself. And I say these things now, but I know when you're in the moment, like it's easier said than done. And with your spouse, like, or partner, you know, I feel like you know, when your partner is going through something like that, just making it okay to not be okay. Like you don't need to have it all together. Like it's okay to, if you want to just go home and cry, if you want to go get drunk and have an emotional night, like you do what you need to do. And like creating the space for that to be okay. Like I know people who've gone through miscarriages that, you know, I've thankfully had a very supportive, loving spouse, but I've seen where it's like they're annoyed by the constant drag, you know, months of this emotional experience, or they just don't know how to show up. And like they'll say things like, "You're fine, it's fine," you know, and it's like, no, it's not fine. This is not fine.
Don't be dismissive.
Stop saying that. Like if somebody's, you know, significant other died, you wouldn't be like, "It's fine, everything's fine, you're gonna be fine." Like you wouldn't say that. So why do we think it's okay to say that in the, you know, when in this space?
That part is that part I feel, because someone else said that in a different interview, where it's like there's certain things that we say, I think, in this type of loss that you wouldn't say in other types, and 100%. It's just as serious as losing a spouse, as losing a parent. Obviously we know it's a different type of grief, like we talked about, but it is like it should be treated the same. So well, thank you so much for coming on, Jen. And again, I'm so happy that you got your 3 rainbow babies. Super excited. Thanks for sharing your story. And for those listening, feel free to check out and subscribe to Morning After wherever you listen to podcasts.